Let me tell you something that you already know. Some of us are thinkers, and some of us are feelers. And the thinkers and feelers usually find their polar opposite and get married. You know, that's usually how it works. I think that's how it worked in our case. And of course, then you end up with kids who are, some of them are more thinkers and some are more feelers. We have some of our kids who, when they were little, at anything that would happen, like there would be this fierce emotional response, and you just wonder, like, where is that coming from right now? That is so incongruent with what has just happened, but it comes out with such intensity. What? You know? And then there's others, you know, who just sort of process their way through it. I was thinking that maybe we could do a little thing where if you're a thinker, raise your hand, or if you're a feeler, raise your hand. But the problem with that is that, like, the thinkers aren't interested in that kind of, like, we're not participating. We're not participating and the feelers, I would probably offend all of them somehow. I would be like, you know, I hear from the thinkers and the feelers all the time, and I'm learning along the way that it's helpful to try to calibrate. You know, if I'm hearing from someone who's a thinker, then great. Let's get into it. Let's talk. Let's discuss. You know, I have a friend who used to go here. They moved away and a long time ago, but even every time they visit, you know, I know that in the lobby after the service, we are going to have a conversation that I would never have with any other human being on the planet, because no one else thinks like that guy. You know, I can't believe the immediate depth of thought that we get into, right? And then there's others that just, you know, they're trying to speak, they're trying to say something, and they just kind of weep, and sort of these guttural things come out. And I've had friends here, you know, maybe they'll come up. I'm thinking of a friend, another one who's not with us anymore here, but you know, would used to kind of grab me with this big embrace and say all of these really meaningful things, just feelings just exuding out. But this would happen with their cheek pressed up against my ear, and I could never hear a single word of it. Like I'm trying to be empathetic, or I'm trying to be yeah, me too, I feel it, you know, but I have no clue what they said, because it's like, you know, suction cup to my ear. You can see I'm trying to point this out because I know we all know it's true, and I'm also trying to be very, very general, because it's so tempting to start to share stories of thinkers and feelers in my life, and that's just a bad idea, so I'm not going to do that. I tend to be more of a thinker than a feeler, and I didn't really realize this before until a couple of years ago. Amy and I were in a conversation with someone, and they were pointing out that you know, you start your sentences differently. That when Dan's speaking, he'll often say, "Well, I think that," and then I'll share whatever I had to say. And when Amy's speaking, she'll say, "I feel that," you know. And so the way that we start our sentences are very different, because I tend to be more of a thinker, and she'll tend to be more of a feeler. But of course, it's also true that none of us can hear this and go, "That's right, I'm a thinker, I'm a feeler," and then just decide that's what you are, as though you're a feeler, you have no need for thinking. That doesn't happen that often on that side, but it definitely happens on the other side. I've heard plenty of some of my buddies out there will say, like, I don't have emotions, you know, I don't feel things, you know. And I'm like, well, that's definitely not true. You know, definitely not. You seem very, very emotionally invested in that statement. One of the things that I really enjoy about watching the Apostle Paul in these chapters through which we're navigating in this series, chapters 15 through 20, we're watching him move from city to city and place to place. And isn't it fascinating to see the character and the nature of these places that he's visiting, and the way that people respond are very different. And so like last week, we saw the drastic difference in the response between the Thessalonians and the Bereans, and so we looked at that, and there was a clear contrast being given to us, so that we really couldn't help but see these two responses to the message and say, well, which one am I? Am I someone who just sort of flies off the handle immediately, or am I someone who will listen and consider and look to see, does this line up with Scripture? We looked at that and talked about the condition of our hearts and the soil of our hearts. Are we the kind of people who receive the Word and allow it to take root and allow it to grow? Are we distracted by other things so that when the Word comes to us, it's quickly snatched away, we forget we're busy, we're off and gone, or what? What kind of soil are we? And that pattern kind of continues as now we're still in chapter 17, and Paul is about to arrive in Athens, and then next week he's going to go to Corinth. And what's interesting to me about Athens and Corinth is that it's almost like you have a whole city of thinkers in Athens and a whole city of feelers in Corinth. It's like they all decided, okay, I have an idea. What if all of us thinkers go and live in one place and all of us feelers live in another place, which would be a terrible idea, right? That would be miserable. It's probably a good thing that thinkers and feelers marry each other and have families and such, right? It's good that in this room we have some who will give a great, heartfelt, emotional response to what God is doing or what He's speaking to them, or something that's broken, or someone that's needy. And it's so good that we have people who will quickly start to think about, well, what does it mean and what should we do about it? It's so valuable. There's no greater one than the other, the thinkers or the feelers. We need both. But in this case, it seems almost as if the thinkers all live in Athens and the feelers all live in Corinth. Even though I tend to be more of a thinker, that's how I usually approach things. I want to understand the situation. I want to think through what is the problem. I want to try to find a solution. That's kind of my way of approaching things. You might be a little bit surprised to hear me say that. Some of you not at all, but maybe because a lot of times when I'm here on the platform, I'm like, Dan, you're crying all the time, right? I know, and that's what's so weird about it, right? There's something about what happens here together that God just squeezes a different part of me, and all the feelings come out. It's wild. It's hard to understand. Well, Paul is here, showing up in Athens, and even though someone might say, well, is Paul a thinker or a feeler? Well, it really just sort of depends, doesn't it? He's taken this approach, and he says elsewhere, I will become all things to all men. Whatever I need to be, that's what I'll be, so that I might win some. Now, he's not talking about an inauthenticity. He's not saying that I'll fake it till I make it. He's not saying I'll pander to whatever people would want me to be. He's saying that I will learn the language. I will learn the language of the culture. I will figure out, what is it that this particular group of people need? What are the barriers to them receiving this word as the truth that it is? And I will take it upon myself to cross those boundaries. And this is the model of the missionary heart of God, right? Where God was the one who crossed all the boundaries when He, as the Son of God, Jesus, becomes a man and steps into this world, this broken culture. He learned the language. He showed up and He took on that human flesh and the perspective of what it's like to live among us in a broken place, and going to the least and the lost and the hurting and the sick and the dying and the sinful and the rebellious and anywhere, and becoming like them so that they would hear His message. And Paul reflected that in the way that he would, as he said, I'll become whatever I need to. I'll become all things to all people in order that I might win some. And so in Acts 17, in verse 16, what happens in the first phrase of this little section that we're in today says that while Paul was waiting for them in Athens, he was greatly distressed to see that the city was full of idols. Let me pause. We'll pick that up in a minute. So remember, he was in Thessalonica, and they all freaked out. They ran him out of town. Then he went to Berea, and things were going great. But the Thessalonians chased him into Berea and then chased him out of town. But Paul was the one who left, and he went to Athens, and the rest of his fellows stayed there in Berea. They had some more discipling work to do. So this is actually the first time in the whole story of Paul, really, that he is on his own. He's flying solo here in this city called Athens. And so while he was waiting for the others to finish up their work and to arrive in Athens, he started moving about the town. And let me try again. We'll read these first few verses, 16 through 21, and just sort of start to get the picture of what's happening. While Paul was waiting for them in Athens, he was greatly distressed to see that the city was full of idols. So he reasoned in the synagogue with both Jews and God-fearing Greeks, as well as in the marketplace day by day with those who happened to be there. A group of Epicurean and Stoic philosophers began to debate with him, and some of them asked, "What is this babbler trying to say?" They remarked, "He seems to be advocating foreign gods." And they said this because Paul was preaching the good news about Jesus and the resurrection. Then they took him and brought him to a meeting of the Areopagus, where they said to him, May we know what this new teaching is that you are presenting. You are bringing some strange ideas to our ears, and we would like to know what they mean. All the Athenians and the foreigners who lived there spent their time doing nothing but talking about and listening to the latest ideas. So all the feelers in the room are going, ugh, right? Like, where's the fun in that? Like, we've got, like, relationships to be in. We've got parties to go to. We've got, fun, like life to do. And all you guys want to do is just sit around talking about ideas, right? Well, that's what they do in Athens, apparently. And as Paul began to move around through the city, what struck him was there are idols everywhere. Historians made the comment that it was easier to find gods in Athens than human beings. Everywhere you went, there was, statues and plaques and these little gods. But what's interesting, though, is that as he moved and he saw all of these, it wasn't actually the religious heritage that is pointed out here directly, but rather all of those gods everywhere he looked were a part of the long-standing culture of this city, and now it was actually the Epicureans and the Stoics who started to engage with him, and they were sort of the prevailing thought of the day. Now, so thinkers, here we go, right? The Epicureans and the Stoics, kind of like rival factions who had not a lot in common, but they did have one thing in common for sure, and that was that they did not believe that anything happened after death, and they did not believe in the supernatural for sure. It's just they sort of arrived there in different places in terms of what they saw was the meaning and the purpose of life. So the Epicureans, their perspective was basically, look, when you die, you die. That's it. You're just a glob of dust and grease, and then off you go, and that's it. And so therefore, in life, what you should do is you should do the very best you can, making it the most meaningful life that you can, and you should enjoy it. And some obviously would take that to extremes and go to sort of like a hedonistic approach, where they just try to pursue as much pleasure as possible. But that was actually kind of the outliers. The Epicureans in general, had a pretty reasonable viewpoint of life, and they understood along the ways the development of that philosophy that there was harm to be had in pursuing pleasure at all costs. And so they wanted meaning in life. They wanted purpose. They just felt like this is all you get, so you better just do the best you can. And then when you're dead, and that's it. And the Stoics, they kind of arrived at the same place, but they came there from a different standpoint. They came there from the standpoint, like, not that life life is full of opportunity and do the best you can and make it great. They came from the standpoint of like life is really hard and life is really painful. And it's really hard to make it through it. But you know what? That's the way that nature is. That's the way that the world works. And so really, you need to just learn how to be satisfied, learn how to be happy, learn how to be content, no matter what's happening. And so if things are going miserable for you, well, be happy, because that's really the only choice you've got. If you're hungry, if you're poor, if you're sick, yep, that's the way life goes. So learn how to bear up under it and, because when you're dead, you're dead. If everything is going great for you, you're getting wealth, you're getting fame, you're getting, people think much of you, that's great. Don't think too highly of yourself, because some people get that. Just, work your way through it, because when you're dead, you're there. So it's the Epicureans and the Stoics that are the ones who are mentioned here, that Paul encounters as he's going through the city. Remember that we've noticed many times he goes to the synagogues first and he starts to share, and then he starts to kind of go out and share out with everybody else and in the streets. And it says here that he went into the marketplace, which is is definitely a point of interest. That there in the marketplace day by day he would share with whoever would happen to be there. I'm trying to think of a nearby place. I don't have a great example in mind, but you might be able to picture some certain shopping centers or a mall or something like that sort of has some, like an amphitheater built into it. There's a place where things happen. Maybe a good example would be right down the street at Lafayette Village. There's sort of a courtyard there. And so from time to time you might see, plays or music or something. Well, he went to where the people are, in the marketplace, and he found, okay, this is clearly the place where people, play their instruments, do their plays, mimes maybe, I don't know. And he got out there and he just started to share with people. And as he did that, it was the Epicureans and the Stoics that noticed and started to listen. And to them, he sounded like he was just babbling, like he was just sort of a mixed-up guy, just picking different parts and pieces out of all the various philosophies, no coherence among it whatsoever. But then what happens is he gets moved from the marketplace, the agora, and taken up to the Areopagus. And so that's what was happening there in verse 19. They took him up and brought him to the meeting of the Areopagus. Now, and they said, well, tell us more about what this message is of yours. And that sounds very pleasant. But the truth is, it wasn't very pleasant. It was very perilous, because the Areopagus was a place where the judges would meet. This is where they would put people on trial. This is where homicides were investigated. This is where many people who have been executed because of crimes for which they were found guilty there in the Areopagus. And so when he was brought up there to the Areopagus to give an account for what he was saying, they were open to some of the ideas he was sharing, but there was a nervous, perilous kind of situation to be in, because this was the very spot where many others had been found guilty. Like, for example, Socrates. Socrates was found guilty there at the Areopagus for basically promoting other ideas or other gods. Back then, that was a bigger deal to them than now, and so they were upset with him about that, and they found him guilty, and they made him drink hemlock, and he died. So on one hand, this is a place where now it's very, very open, and they're the real thinkers. They want to hear about all the philosophies that are out there. On the other hand, there's a long history of people eventually crossing the line with those thoughts and philosophies, and things not going too well. But everyone knew that this was the center of philosophical thought and dialogue and debate, even though some people were executed in the process. This was home to Plato and Aristotle and Socrates. And if you are a Princess Bride fan, maybe there's a quote that pops into your mind where Vizzini says, have you heard of Plato, Aristotle, and Socrates? Yes? Morons. Well, here Paul is brought up here as one who's advocating for foreign gods, and in fact, how foreign, how confused were they about Paul's message? They had never heard of Jesus. They were confused about who this is. And there's reason to believe that they thought that he was talking about Jesus and the resurrection as though they were two different gods. So he starts to proclaim Jesus, and he starts to proclaim the resurrection. And they're going, okay, well, Jesus and the resurrection must be like one of the other ones alongside Jesus. And they're just kind of receiving this through their framework. And he sorts all of that out and explains, no, that's not what we mean. And then he gets into this message. And if you've been struggling to track so far through the different philosophies and philosophers that are here, let me tell you, this message that Paul shares in verse 22 through 31 is really one of my favorite moments of the gospel being proclaimed in the whole New Testament. That's a very, very feeler thing to say. I love them all. But this is so powerful. And I want to read it for you here, verse 22 through 31. Listen to Paul's message. He stood up in the meeting of the Areopagus, and he said, "People of Athens, I see that in every way you are very religious. For as I walked around and looked carefully at your objects of worship, I even found an altar with this inscription, 'To an unknown God.' So you are ignorant of the very thing you worship. And this is what I am going to proclaim to you. The God who made the whole world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth, and does not live in temples built by human hands. And he is not served by human hands as if he needed anything. Rather, he himself gives everyone life and breath and everything else. From one man he made all nations, that they should inhabit the whole earth, and he marked out their appointed times in history and the boundaries of their lands. God did this so that they would seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he is not far from any one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being. As some of your own poets have said, we are his offspring. Therefore, since we are God's offspring, we should not think that the divine being is like gold or silver or stone, an image made by human design and skill. In the past, God overlooked such ignorance, but now he commands all people everywhere to repent. For he has set a day when he will judge the world with justice by the man he has appointed, and he has given proof of this to everyone by raising him from the dead. Power in that message. Now, I'm sure that probably Luke condensed it quite a bit. Paul is not known, neither am I, for a good, powerful 3-minute message. But there's such power in this, and you can hear Paul is speaking to the thinkers. He's recognizing where he is, and he's pulled in from their life and their culture what they will understand, and presenting to them a clear picture in their language of Jesus, the one true Son of God. And as he does this, he starts by saying, "I see you're very religious," which was actually a little sarcastic. Because here's the irony of that whole thing. Even though there were idols and plaques and gods everywhere, that was from their culture before, and now the reigning philosophy of the city was, that of the Stoics and the Epicureans. They didn't see themselves really at all as religious people. And so when Paul says, "I see you're very religious," he was sort of pointing out that you are surrounded by your own history and culture, which you have since abandoned, but you are surrounded by your own history and culture of all these gods. And so when he says, "I see you're very religious," these guys are thinking, "We are not. Don't you call us that." And he goes, "Well, look around you. There's all of these gods, and they're all ones that your entire civilization has been built upon, putting trust in the God of this and the God of that to see you through all of the different things that you would face in life and that you were dependent on. And so even though your current philosophy doesn't really say that the way your old one did, the fact is you are steeped in dependence on all of these other gods. And he's pointing out that even your own philosophy has become a god to you. So they would say, well, we're not religious. And he goes, well, actually you are. In fact, everyone is. There's no such thing as a person without a god. There's plenty of people who will claim to be atheist or agnostic or whatever. But there's no such thing as a person without a god. We all have them. It's just whether we name them or not, or we say that we believe them or not, or if we're intentionally devoted to them or not. Well, then he gives this great intro, and he says, so you're ignorant. I'm probably not going to use that intro here. Good morning, church. You're ignorant. That's not really, I don't find that personally that effective, so we'll avoid that. But he says, so you're ignorant of what you worship. And there's kind of two meanings in there. You are ignorant of the very thing you worship. For those who have in the history of this city worshipped these gods, he's saying there's even a God here that says to the unknown God, you don't even know who that is. You're ignorant of the God you worship. But he's also pointing the finger at these Stoics and Epicureans saying, and you don't even realize that you're worshipers. You're ignorant of what you worship. You think you're so smart. You think you're so advanced. You think you've got it all figured out. But the truth is, you're still worshipers. You're just ignorant of what you worship. So he says, let me proclaim to you the real God who is worth worshiping. And he says, the God who made this world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth, and then goes on to describe him. And he says that God, in verse 24 through 26, is far above and beyond any system, any philosophy, any idol, any foreign god, named or unnamed. There is no one and nothing that rivals him in any way. And that is a truth, a reality that is outside of all other realities that we see, touch, feel, think. And even if you disagree, you will discover one day, as we all will, that that is precisely true. He is the uncaused cause. He is the beginning of all the questions and the answers. He's the unavoidable reality. And all of the theories and all of the things that are promoted as alternative means of explanation of the universe and everything in it, they all find this one truth inescapable, that at some point, before whatever your idea is, there has to be someone or something else. And if we're at all going to evaluate what ideas are good and what are not, what behaviors are good and what are not, then all of that has to come from someplace. And so we can stick it together with the Scotch tape called billions and billions and billions and billions of years and hold it together. But the truth is, it all falls apart. There is an uncaused cause. There is an unavoidable reality. And everyone knows it in their hearts. And so Paul stands there and he says, actually, let me just be blunt with you and tell you what you already know. The God of heaven and earth that created everything, and they so want to say, I don't believe in that God, but they know he's right. They don't know who he is, but they know, okay, fine, everything came from someplace, right? And so he says he does not need anything. And I just want to remind you something we talked about a number of weeks ago, that this I think, important thought. There is one thing that you and I have an unlimited supply of, which God has none. Someone might say, oh, sin, right? Well, believe it or not, even our sin is limited. There is one thing that we have an unlimited supply of that God has never, ever, ever had and never will, and that's need. He does not need anything, never has needed anything, never will need anything. We, by our very nature, by our very existence, every single thing in the entire created universe has need. There are some pieces that must be present. There are some needs that must be met. There is some resource or energy that must hold together. Nothing exists apart from need except God. He needs nothing. He is not served by human hands as if he needed anything. Rather, it is he himself who gives life and breath and everything else. So one of the first things we learned right away in Paul's message is God doesn't need, he gives. Why? Verse 27. Not so that we would have everything we want. People might hear, oh, God doesn't need, he gives. Well, I've been asking him, I've been praying, and I'm still praying, I'm still waiting. Well, he's not the giver so that we have everything we want. He's not the giver so that we feel only great feelings. He's not the giver so that we can achieve our dreams or know all the answers or be right in the marketplace of ideas. Nope, verse 27 says exactly why he gives. He did this so that we would seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him. Yeah. That even in the meeting of our needs, God is about us relating to him. He's the centerpiece, he's the focus, he's the point, and all of our need is fully met in him. And so God's answer to our prayers is never outside of him. And as we're praying to him and we're asking him to meet a need, he cares for us, he provides for us, he protects us, he heals us. But those are not things that he gives us apart from himself. If it comes from God, it is a part of himself. And that's one of the reasons why he will never give to us anything that is contrary to himself. Because everything that he gives is to pull us into relationship with himself. He did this so that we would seek him, perhaps reach out for him and find him, even though he is not very far from any of us, he says. God is not far, he is near. He is close. And isn't it amazing that our need is the very thing that points us to him? It's our questions, it's our need, it's our fear, it's our struggle, it's our weakness. All of the things that we're most conscious of that we need, those are the things that he uses to pull us into him. And when he gets to verse 28 here, he says, "For in him we live and move and have our being." As some of your own poets have said, we are his offspring. Paul is sort of quoting some lyrics. He's quoting the Taylor Swift of his day. Epimenides was a poet and a philosopher who wrote about a historical event in this city, and it was kind of a silly thing where the people were trying to figure out which of their gods they could count on, and we don't have time to get into all of that, but once they kind of settled in on the one that they felt like they could count on, Epimenides is the one who wrote, "In him we live and move and have our being." And so Paul picks that up and he says, you've said this. You've said this in your culture. Herodotus wrote in his poem, Phaenomena, "We are his offspring," talking about another of the gods. He's saying, like, even in your imaginations of all your idols, you understand that the whole reason why you have them is because you need them. The whole reason why anyone has any idol, the whole reason why anyone has any god, is because we have need. And so we look for someone or something to meet our needs. And so Paul uses the lyrics from their songs of the day, basically, their poems of the day, and says, like, if you say that, then isn't it true? It makes no sense that your gods could be your own creation. I know, it's hard. We're here for the thinkers today, so just try to bear up with me here. I love the way that Isaiah talks about this in Isaiah 44 when he's explaining kind of the illogical absurdity of those who make idols. You know, if you have an idol in your house, Paul would say, or one on your street corner, or one in here in the Areopagus or wherever, you know, someone had to make that. Someone had to fill out the order form. Well, where do you get the order form? Like Gods R Us or what? Like you fill out you get the QR code, you go to the thing, you put in your credit card, you got to fill it out. Someone pays to have that done. And they pay someone who goes out into the woods and chops down a tree and brings the tree in, and he's hungry, so he chops some of it up and he puts it on the fire and he uses it to cook food, you know, and then he uses the other half and he said, well, what should I make with this half? I know, I'll make that idol that person ordered for me to make. And so he warms himself with half of the tree, and he starts chiseling out the idol with the other tree, and as he does, he prays to it, and he says, save me, you are my God. This is what happens in Isaiah 44. But listen to verse 19 and 20. No one stops to think. No one has the knowledge or the understanding to say, half of it I used for fuel, I even baked bread over its coals, I roasted meat and I ate it. Shall I make a detestable thing from what is left? Shall I bow down to a block of wood? Such a person feeds on ashes. A deluded heart misleads him. He cannot save himself or say, is not this thing in my right hand a lie? Can I just ask you, as you look around and you see how our culture is built and the things after which people chase and invest their whole lives, maybe even be courageous enough to look at your own life and where your time and your energy and your focus and your stress and your fear and all of the things are affixed. Is it possible we could ask this question? Is not this thing in my hand a lie? Am I depending on, trusting in, going after, devoting my life to an idea, an achievement, a status, a wealth, a reputation, whatever, that in the end is nothing more than a lie? It does not produce life, and it will not meet my needs. Only God can do that. It makes no sense to worship our own creations. God is not made, he makes. Paul brings it home in verse 30 and 31 with the hardest word for anyone. It makes us choke when we read it. Verse 30 and 31. In the past, God overlooked such ignorance, but now he commands all people everywhere to repent. Yeah, to stop. To stop and change and turn around. For he has set a day when he will judge the world with justice by the man he has appointed. He has given proof of this to everyone by raising him from the dead. I want to take you quickly to Jesus' words in John chapter 5. Jesus said in verse 21, for just as the Father raises the dead and gives them life, even so the Son gives life to whom he is pleased to give it. Moreover, the Father judges no one, but has entrusted all judgment to the Son, that all may honor the Son just as they honor the Father. Whoever does not honor the Father or the Son whoever does not honor the Son does not honor the Father who sent him. I'm going to skip down a little bit to verse 28. Do not be amazed at this, for a time is coming when all who are in their graves will hear his voice and come out. Those who have done what is good will rise to live. Those who have done what is evil will rise to be condemned. By myself I can do nothing. I judge only as I hear, and my judgment is just. For I seek not to please myself, but him who sent me. And Paul is saying to them and to us and to anyone who will listen to this message, verse 31, God has set a day. And it may look like the world goes on as it always has. It may seem like God overlooks the evil that happens all around us, or the brokenness that we might grieve over, or our own rebellion for that matter. But the truth is, verse 31, God has set a day. He has set a day when he will judge the world with justice by the man that he appointed, and that man is Jesus. Jesus will return as the righteous judge. God does not overlook or neglect or forget. He sees, he knows he's coming again with justice. God is no fool. He is a righteous judge. But hear me, he is full of mercy. This judge is full of mercy, and his mercy has a name, Jesus. And the promise of his mercy is that he rose Jesus from the dead. Jesus was resurrected. That's the proof that Paul appeals to. And so how do the people respond? In verse 32, when they heard about this resurrection, some of them sneered, as you would expect from this particular group of thinkers. But others said, we want to hear you more again on this subject. This has been a dramatic collision with their entire worldview. And at this moment, all they can say, some of them, is, there is something here. I don't know what it is, but it has the ring of truth. It has the ring of power. Something that you're saying, Paul, about this Jesus fits like a skeleton key in the whole rest of this, the worldviews that everyone has. It unlocks and untwists and aligns all the things that all of these different cultures and philosophies have been trying to get at. There's something here that has the ring of truth to it. We want to hear more from you on this subject. And I really hope they did, but I don't know, because in a moment we're going to see that he leaves and he goes somewhere else. At that, Paul, verse 33, left the council. Some people became followers of Paul. They believed. Among them was Dionysius, a member of the Areopagus, and also a woman named Damaris, and a number of others. And after this, Paul left Athens, and he went to Corinth. Can I just draw your attention back as we close to verse 27? God did all of this. He is this so that we would reach out to him, seek him, and perhaps find him. He's not far. He's close. His mercy has a name. It's Jesus. Do you remember when Paul said, I see you're a very religious people, and you could feel them bristle. We are not. Don't call us that. I wondered, as I've been reflecting on this passage, what would happen if Paul did show up down at Lafayette Village or at some mall or whatever and gave this exact same message. And if he said to Raleigheites, is that what we are? I don't know. If he said to us, I see you're a very religious people. Just starting there, what would our town's culture say? Some of them would say, yes, sir, I go to such and such church, and whatever. A lot of them would say, we are not, right? We are not. I don't like that word. I'm spiritual. I'm not religious. Okay. And I wonder if Paul would say, well, you say that you're not, but look around you. And we would go, well, we don't have like statues and gods and plaques and all the things, right? Yeah, but remember what all those were for? The god or goddess of wisdom, of war, of prosperity, all the things, right? And maybe he would point to our stadiums and our colleges and our hospitals and all aspects of our culture and go, actually, you're pretty religious. Actually, you're really, really dependent on a lot of things that you believe are going to make your life okay. But the truth is, there is a God that is far above and beyond all of that, all of this, all that you hold in your hand. Is it not kind of a lie? It will not see you through the day that God has set. He has set a day. And it's a day when he will come with just justice. But this judge is so full of mercy. And the mercy, his name is Jesus. And here and now is your opportunity to do what was said here, to repent, to turn from your dependence on, your idolatry of all the other, whatever other thing, and say, No, it's in you, and only you, that I live and move and have my being. You and only you are worthy of my life and worship. You know, for him to say or do any of this, it was risky for him to say. It was risky for him to go there and say these things. But how did it all start? It started because as he moved through the town, he was overwhelmed. The word there was he was provoked by the Spirit. He was pained. He saw around him a whole people, a celebrated culture that was very proud of itself, but full of people who were lost. And the pain that he felt compelled him to say, my dear people of Athens, you don't even know who you worship. The one who am I about to proclaim is him. I wonder if we could be that kind of light and that kind of church in our city, in our town. Would you pray with me? God, the most brilliant minds, the deepest thinkers, the smartest people, on our very best days, our highest thoughts are mere foolishness to you. I pray, Lord, that wherever we have knowingly or unknowingly staked our claim, risked it all, are dependent on, are looking to anything or anyone else, any other idea, any other philosophy of life, any other perspective, any other pursuit, other than you who deserves it. Lord, please help us to hear that command to repent and help us to turn around and to lay our focus on you again. Help us as a church, as followers of Jesus, to feel that prodding, that pain inside as we move throughout a culture that has lost its way. Help us to find some way, any way, to stand and say, my dear people, let me tell you about the one who made it all, the one who is close to you and calling you, the one full of justice and mercy. I pray, Lord, that you would empower that response here and now and wherever we go, that we would share that truth with people who are lost and do not know who they worship. Thank you, Jesus, for being so full of mercy. We depend on you and only you. In your name, amen.